Alright, Magical Girl Raising Project Limited. I've gone ahead and finished volumes 5 and 6. This was an interesting change of pace for these two volumes, exploring more of the politics of the Magical Kingdom along with the new set of girls. I've got them all in the storage here, so we'll see how I end up placing them. I will say that the pacing of this arc was particularly interesting, right? Because in the first volume of it, volume 5, no one died, and then everyone everyone started dying in volume 6. There was kind of a build up to the catastrophe this time around, quite a big build up, and it was quite the read, I'll say. I'll get into my thoughts as I go into the characters. I think this is the set of characters I'm the most unsure about so far, but I'm sure I'll be able to rant about them accordingly as I go ahead and place them. First is Captain Grace, the first one to die, actually. I believe her human name was Umi, which makes sense. Captain Grace, the sea. She's all about adventure. She has the ability to summon a giant magic pirate ship, and she's out of the middle school group, the most combat oriented, or at least initially that's how it seems. Um, she she's kind of like a Nemarine, right? In the fact that she dies first, kind of gets to get things rolling. A magical daisy, all that. She didn't really do much for me, but I don't really dislike her either. So I think I'll push her at the top of C. There's nothing really about her that grabbed me. She has a cute design, and her spunkiness was fun to read, but it also made it kind of obvious that she was going to be one of the first ones to die, and well, she was. Next is Funny Trick, who is Umi's partner in Umi's brain, and in Funny Trick's brain, not so much. I initially did not particularly care for Funny Trick. I feel like her perspective wasn't giving me much, but Captain Grace's death did bump her up a bit. I will say she's probably above Daisy, right there. No, above Winter Prison. Um, Her magic to switch around stuff and her design is pretty neat. She pulled a fast one on Frederica. Um, yeah, yeah, I think she'll go there. Funny Trick, I like where she went from where she was. I can appreciate her design for what it is, that kind of gambler, jester ish, um, fishnets and bunny suit type of look. And she has a cute hairstyle and coloration. I mean, she's kind of middle of the road, as you can see by her placement. I do appreciate how she had that internal struggle with herself about whether she was glad or not about Captain Grace's death because of how she viewed her situation. Never being able to escape from the bullying as she viewed it. The bullying presence. Captain Grace didn't see it that way, but she did, and there's that kind of internal conflict. So she did grow me a bit, I will say. Hana Gekukoju, I think, is how you pronounce that. Hana, the rabbit girl with sharpened senses. Her design is great, and I think she herself is great. She's kind of a little awkward, maybe a little silly, but this poor girl goes through it a lot. How many times has she jumped in Limited by the whole Toko squad, the middle school squad, then by the evil, like the witches, the evil magical girls, and then Pukin goes in to finish her off. She has a strong sense of duty. Hana. She does it out of care for Mana, and I think even though her ability is just sharpening senses, they use it in some clever ways. So she was pretty enjoyable. I will say, and her death was a noble one. She's probably right above funny trick. Next is Kurukuru Hime, the unique one out of the middle school group because she's their teacher. She's probably the one from the middle school group that I appreciated the most. She's gonna go right under Rionetta. The whole perspective we got of her as Nozomi Himeno, with her mother already being passed and her curt father, and just how she was, like she was that more human, touch to the middle school group, because in the middle school group you have like these kind of wild backstories. Not saying that they aren't realistic or that there's nothing to be found in them, but I feel like hers was a little more grounded and just easier to relate to and understand. Also, she has a pretty design. The whole ballerina and ribbons thing I think is really neat, and the fact that she used it as armor and a drill against that final fight with Pukin was really fun as well. Kurukuru Hime is really neat. I like her bewilderment and exasperation throughout the whole situation, and she's the first to actually pair up with the investigation team, being the adult that she is. So it was neat. With this set of girls, right? It's particularly hard to voice my thoughts on them because I don't know my thoughts on the arc as a whole. It's hard to place. It's limited in the time of the scenario and the scope of the scenario and how many magical girls can influence things. In fact, a lot of these characters are limited by their circumstances. Hana is limited by her care for Mana. Captain Grace is limited by her mindset and focus on adventure. Funny Trick is limited by Captain Grace, whether Captain Grace realizes or not. Kurukuru Hime is limited by taking care of her parents and her position as a teacher for her students. That's what traps her as a magical girl in the first place, because she wants to protect her students. Now that I'm thinking on it, a lot of these girls are so-called limited in their situations, and maybe that's the running theme that I didn't notice till now. When you talk about things, you get a different perspective. That's why I like to do these videos, because stuff that's just floating around in my brain, I put it into words, whether it's eloquently or not. It's there, right? And it's on record for people to watch, right? So, but yeah, Kurukuru Hime was neat. Mana is, I don't know. I really do not know. Part of me doesn't like her, and part of me does. I do appreciate that she's part of the inspection team, but she's not a magical girl. She's a mage. There's a difference there. She doesn't have the physical enhancements that others do. She doesn't have a special ability. She uses magic tools, and she is a human. She's very prone to anger, especially towards poor Nanako-san, that's 7753. In the novel, they say it's written 7753, but pronounce it Nanako-san. But anyway, Mana, we're talking about Mana right now. She's a little bit over Captain Grace. I feel like her streak of anger wasn't really fully explored. Like, you can tell she cares for the inspection team, and she's angry about their deaths and all the stuff they had to go through and everything like that. She probably has a little bit of a complex of not being a magical girl and being a mage instead. And with her and Nanako-san, there's some sort of bonding, but it doesn't flourish. Like, when I think of, for example, the Petchka's party in Restart, I think that's a relationship that started off rocky, but it flourished. I didn't get that flourish with Mana, unfortunately, and I would have liked to see that. And her death was kind of like, all the deaths are sudden in this series, but it's more so kind of thrown to the side. Like, she overdrugs herself fighting Pukin, and she falls down, but that's it. There wasn't. I didn't feel the weight, And I like her design. I think the concept of her being a human mage in this sea of magical girls and having to be the leader of the inspection team throughout all this nonsense is a neat concept. I just didn't get, more than shallow water personally. But, she's neat. And if in side stories, I did see that there was more side story volumes, we get more of her. I would not be opposed to seeing more. And that goes to, with Captain Grace as well. Um, Next is Posterie or Posterie. I say Posterie, it's funner to say. She is limited. Oh, well, yeah, limited by being a human and by her complex. Postery is limited by her need for friendship, right? We go pretty in depth on how she feels about social interaction and how her parents just kind of let her float by the waves. And she's so limited by her need for social interaction and friendship that she got a taste with Rain Pal, who unfortunately was Rain Pal, and we'll get to Rain Pal, but she was so starved for that she became limited in what she felt she could do and what she did. Um, I think her situation is particularly interesting because she somewhat acknowledges that she's following around Rain Pao and Toko, and that they're evil and such. And she has doubts, but she chooses to ignore her very understandable and founded doubts to stick with the one person she really considers a friend because she feels like she can't function without them. She is limited because she trapped herself, and that's so unfortunate for her because it does not pay off. Uh, while it wasn't necessarily Rain Pao directly who did kill her, she was killed by Rain Pao. Pukin's magic and all that. So she's a B as well. Funny trick. I don't know if she's above Hana or not. Hana was fun, but her whole magic of delivering. You know what? She's above Hana, and I'll tell you why. Her whole magic of delivering things back to the owner with the wings and express delivery and all that was actually used pretty cleverly. You think of the station wagon, you think of Ripple becoming a pincushion, and I'll get to Ripple at the end, but you get to that, and a lot of little things with her ability. That's what puts her above Hana. Well, Hana was neat with her ability. Postery had a unique ability which I did not expect to be used in certain ways, like the kunai pin cushion, which gave me despair for about half the volume until I read the epilogue. But again, we'll get to that. Wedden is, how do I say, a bit self-centered, overconfident, and she certainly has her ideals about what a magical girl should be. She's the self-elected leader of the newly transformed middle school group. Her ability and her design are really, really cool. She can make someone keep any promise, and there's a lot of little intricacies to that. And like her wedding dress bouquet with candles that flicker due to her emotions with the change and stuff. And she's got real pretty eyes too. Definitely one of my favorite designs for this set of girls, for sure. She's gonna get an A because her whole back and forth by being controlled with Pukin and then like working with Frederica and eventually failing, but like she's right under Kurukuru Hime, I think. Yeah, I would say that. This a lot of her actions are done because of her ability. She knows she's weaker physically as a magical girl. She knows that if she catches someone with a slip of the tongue, she can make them promise something, and she does that to her entire team. Um, Yeah, it's hard to place what I want to say about her. I think Wedding is actually she's limited by herself, and I mean a lot of these girls are, but I'll explain. She's limited by her ability. She focuses so much on her ability that I feel like other opportunities that were there were a little bit not realized by her. She's so focused on her ideology of what a magical girl is, fighting for justice and all that, and that she has a whole breakdown near the end of Volume 6, yelling at Mana and Nanako-san about what she thinks a magical girl should be, and that everyone in the magical kingdom is trash. And you know what? She's right. She's fully and completely and honestly right. Magical Kingdom sucks. And she was really entertaining. I liked her a whole bunch. The way she died, being caught in her own loop of promises and getting tripped by Frederica on the train, was sudden, and I didn't expect it. I honestly expected Wenning to be one of the survivors, maybe messed up like Ripple was, but no, she was gone just like that. And sometimes that's just the way the train derails, right? Quite literally, in this sense, I would say. Archfiend Pam is wonderful, dude. She is like, she's so cool. Like, I don't know, is she S? It's hard to place her because like, she'll be right under Cranberry, uh, vertically, not horizontally, because Meow Meow's whole backstory and loneliness does hit my heart a bit more. But Archfiend Pam is up there for cool points. Her ability is somewhat overpowered and is great. Her 4, actually 6 wings that can transform and do a whole bunch of different things. I like how she was the mentor to Cranberry, and she's more, while she possibly has the same ideals as Cranberry, she's less bloodthirsty and more limited. There we go. Limited is the word of the day, folks. Limited by her own ideology. She chooses to be limited to the Magical Kingdom system and her department. She chooses to be used as a tool because she decides that it's better to be limited that way. And I found that really interesting. It's I don't know if it's a direct foil to Cranberry per se, but it's like a skewed take on what Cranberry could have been. And she's not necessarily good. She's just doing what she's told to do. She's the weapon to send in to kill the assassin. Um, Although the fight scenes with her were great, whether it was just her wing that was doing it or herself, that whole fight scene when she went up against Sonia Bean was awesome until Rain Pal ruined it. And Rain Pal is coming up real close. We'll get to you, Rain Pal. She was the first death I was shocked about, like truly, when Rain Pal's rainbow went straight through her, and then multiple, like, and then they had the art of her on the page bleeding out, standing in shock. Like, she's this confident thing, slapping Rain Pal and Poster V around, trying to educate them on what a true magical girl should be. And you think, oh, okay, that's how Cranberry kind of got her thing going on. Her mindset of what a strong magical girl is, and her battle sense and everything from Archfiend Pam here. But, like, I expected her to die, just not in that way, and that was perfect. Like, she was, even in close quarters against the 3 villains, the 4 of them, Top Pop was up above the ground shooting down her musical notes. She was holding her own. And she got Sonia Bean, so, she did accomplish something. Archfiend Pam, like, there's more depth to her, I'm sure. I'm sure in one of the side volumes maybe we'll get more of her. Maybe before she was on the team, maybe when she was training Cranberry or something like that. But just for coolness points and intrigue, and just like her mindset that she chooses to be limited by, super cool, dude. Like, super cool. I don't know. I didn't think much of her at first. Um, I just thought she was just kind of like a sultry, I'm here, super powerful. Like I thought she was more like Cranberry, and she was her own character, and I appreciate that. So Archie Pam, A for A, you win. Good job. Togo's an F. Toko is an F, but she has a slightly cuter design than Fav, so you know. I mean, what do I say? She's a bratty fairy who goes around creating magical girls to suit her own benefit and then abandons them. And she's obviously manipulated Rainpow to do what Rainpow does. I was just waiting for her to get squashed, like in the sense of an annoying fairy trope. She certainly was one. A brute, I guess, despite her small size, and always angry and yelling at everyone. And ugh, I mean, cute design. I can't tell. Like, this is the only pic we have of her, and all the other pics in the novels, she's stuffed in Rainpow's shirt, so we don't really see her. I don't know if those are giant frills or wings. I mean, I can appreciate her for her role. She's like. I've seen multiple fairies in media that are initially thought to be on the good side. They're actually mischievous little critters that deserve to get squashed, and she's one of them. But when she dies by Rainpow, by the way, when Pukin is controlling Rainpow with her sword, Rainpow is hallucinating, and she uses her rainbows to destroy, slice up Postery and Toko. So Toko died by the one she raised, which I think is a fitting enough end for her. But she's Fav 2.0, serves her purpose, is meant to be hated. You celebrate when they're not there anymore, right? Rainpow is a little bit of a different case. I did not expect at all Rainpow to be who she was. Honestly, she surprised me in how thorough her ability was and how she fought, and it took me a bit to realize, even though she was like killing people already, that like she was the assassin. But she's the whole reason this story happens, her and Toko, but mostly her. I think her twin tail and like multi halo design is actually really cute. I think that ability to create like rainbow bridges that are sharp and weapons in any like straight line is really interesting. It's used sparingly at first, right? Because she has to make believe that she's a new magical girl with the other middle schoolers. So she only uses it as a bridge, and runs around on it to get away from like Ripple and all that. But then you realize she's using it almost like a projectile, and after that whole thing with Archie and Pam, it's really showcased through her battles with the following magical girls, but especially with Ripple. And that whole image of them running around the hole in the ground created by Archie and Pam and Sonia, right? And the kunai and the rainbow clashing and all of that, like that is what made me like her even more. So she's a real piece of work, Miss One. She dies the same time that Wedden dies. She ends up getting controlled by Pukim. She's all over the place, but she's neat. She's probably here. Yeah, she's probably here. She's not particularly like too interesting as like a twist antagonist, I guess, when compared to someone like Noko. But for what she does, She might be bottom of A, actually. She might be bottom of A. I understood her more than I understood Melville, so she is one place above. Um, Next is Top Pop. What a cute name! What a cute design! What a cute character overall. It is too bad that she was trained by Frederica, right? I feel like if anyone could have changed sides from evil to good, it would have been her. She was so enthusiastic, maybe a little too accepting of people, and that's why she fell into the wrong crowd, you know? Um, Her whole, like, rock, punk, whatever you want to call it, motif is really cool. Unique design for this series, which is full of frills and, you know, flowy outfits. Hers is more loose and haggard, as is Sonia's, but Sonia is more frilly. And her ability to make music notes that she plays on her guitar into projectile weapons, put that in a Don Maku shmup game, right? And that's wonderful bullet patterns there. She was really neat. I liked her. She's also probably an A. I was expecting her to die, unfortunately. Um, and overall, she's less interesting than Rain Pal because she's just kind of an accessory to Frederica. But I did like her a bunch. So good job, Top Pop. Sonia Bean, Sonia B. I'm gonna say more than Cherna. No, more than Fall, whatever you want to say. Um, Cute design. I like the frills. I like the pale, almost ghost doll design. She barely speaks, and she rips into food, and she kills Captain Grace with her disintegration ability. I didn't get the vibe though of overly dangerous, magical girl. Her biggest highlight is her fight with Archfiend Pam, and because it's through Archfiend Pam's point of view, the highlight mostly goes to Pam, right? But she was neat. I liked her for what she for what she was. Sonia Bean, Sonia B. The B is in her name. What can I say? Except she was pretty neat. Also, I again forgot about limitations. Rain Pal is limited by Toko. Toko taught her on what she expected from a magical girl, and then Rain Pal, with her backstory with her sister, she's limited by her sister. She breaks free of her limitation, and that's why she ended up the way she was. Some limits are meant to be broken, some are not. I'm glad she wasn't in that situation. She just anymore, but because of Toko, she definitely got out of it the wrong way. You know what I'm saying? Top Pop was limited by her devotion to her master, Frederica, and Toko was limited by being a little thing. No. Toko was limited by being weak and having to rely on magical girls, and also a certain thing which we'll get to at the end when I talk about Ripple and someone else. In fact, that someone else might be soon. But anyway, Pukin is awesome. Right there with Archfiend Pam. As an antagonist, Pukin is. Do I want to break the streak of wonderful fighters here? I mean, Pukin is also a wonderful fighter. Yeah, no, Pukin's gonna go there. Archfiend Pam, I felt more about the death, but Pukin was brutal. Pukin's limited by her emotions, right? She gets angry, and when she gets angry, she gets hungry, and then she eats, and then gets angry again. When you think of some ancient prisoner, right, that was sealed away, you think of a couple of things, like when you trope-wise. You think of, they were super crazy and had big powers and people couldn't handle their attitude, right? That's what Pukin is. Or you think of some ancient evil that can't be comprehended, and, well, we didn't really have that here. But Pukin is a fun design, kind of like a squire. I know it's more a knight, right? General Pukin is her title. With her sword, she can manipulate things that are pierced by it, their emotions and their actions and their perceptions. Um, Her whole concept and design are really appealing. She's also, along with Sonya, but mostly her, she's English. She doesn't speak Japanese, so she's basically an intruder into this whole situation because of Frederica. And every time Pukin's on screen, you just get the sense of what is about to go wrong here, right? Like, what is about to go wrong? And you can never really figure it out until it happens. You know, the whole thing with Hana and Pukin getting slayed by Hana, right? Pukin killing whoever she wants, such as Nozomi Himeno's father. Pukin manipulating Wedden, and then Rain Pao. You know, Pukin really shines once Sonya Bean dies, right? Because she loses herself to that anger, but she doesn't lose her composure entirely. That may be due to her feasting on like an entire convenience store worth of food, you know, of course after killing the owner, but I digress. Her sword, of course, is the most interesting thing about her. The fact that she manipulates Wedden, the fact that she manipulates Toko is really cool. So how Pukin defeats oh my goodness, Rain Pao is she breaks off a point of her sword, which again, even if you kissed, you're pricked by it, you're done. One slice, you're done. She gives it to Toko, who is already manipulated by her. Toko flies to Rain Pao, you know, thinking oh, Toko's escaped from her grasp because I distracted Pukin. Toko then pricks Rain Pao with the little point of the sword, the chip that was broken off. Rain Pao doesn't even realize she's hallucinating because of Pukin's sword, proceeds to slice up Postery and Toko. Postery didn't deserve that. Oof for her, you know, again limited by her situation. Toko definitely deserved that. I cheered silently when I read that. But Pukin is clever in ways that I wouldn't have imagined. And I think her whole dialect is fun. It's not English. She just refers to herself as we and our, like in plural. And I think it's just like the way of 130 years ago, I think, where she's from. You know, her dialect. And maybe just how she considers herself an army or something like that. The absolute greatest thing Pukin does is her final fight, though, which goes crazy. She manipulates her dying / dead body by cutting herself. Her face is her brain is like exposed, and her eye is missing, and half her head is gone. And she cuts herself and manipulates herself into thinking she's still alive. And that's when she kills Kurukuru Hime and Funny Trick. Because they think the battle's over, but it's never over until it's over. Right? And it takes Kurukuru Hime, Funny Trick, Nonako, Mana, and then Tsukume and Frederica out of nowhere to put her down. And Tsukume gets the final blow for that by crawling into her eye hole, becoming wind, and then blowing her up from inside, which is brutal. Everything about Pukin is brutal. She consumes Toko's remains because it gives her power. Like, she is stuck in 130 years ago. It makes her especially brutal in a different way than how Cranberry was. And it becomes such an entertaining read when you view Pukin that she's up there. She's great. You know, speaking of all that, she probably really is above Archery Pam. Though they're real close. They could switch places anytime, I'll say. Nanako-san, 7753. I'll tell you this. She gets big points by being... Who's lucky? Who is it? It's Piffle. Her goggles can... It's like a super scanner. You can see every little detail about adding what she looks at. However, very early on in Volume 5, there's a little paragraph that mentioned that her boss took her goggles and modified them, or rather had them modified so that it could display more information and so that she could communicate through the goggles by, typing up some stuff. So, of course, when you view all the text messages that are in the goggles, while reading, there's no way you can't tell it's Piffle. It's such a Piffle way of giving orders. I was so happy. I was like, Piffle's relevant. Yes, I'm so happy. And yeah, I mean, she didn't have an involved role, but she did have a role, and she was in the epilogue. And it looks like Piffle is, trying to raise her status in the magical kingdom so she can reform how magical girls are treated and accepted. Piffle is the greatest, consistently, even when she's not even a main character and she's just communicating through Nanako-san. She's great. And of course, the one who modified the goggles couldn't be anyone other than Shadow Gale. In the end, Kanaway and Momori, they're talking about stuff, and Momori doesn't understand anything. It seems like Shadow Gale isn't particularly active as a magical girl anymore. Honestly, I can't blame her. But, I'm sure later volumes we'll get into that, or some side stories. Anyway, enough about V-Star characters. We're talking about limited. You know how Nanako-san is limited? She's limited by her job, and by extension, Piffle. Nanako-san lives and dies by her job. She's done this 7 years as, part of the... Was it diplomacy? The diplomacy that she was part of? Or whatever, one of the departments. But Nanako-san, she's limited because she wants to be paid. She wants to keep her job. And she's limited because Piffle is Piffle. And she doesn't want to lose what she has. So she's a non-combatant magical girl thrown into combat. You can imagine how rough that is for her. Her design is super cute. The boys' school uniform is a really neat touch. I think her goggles fit her really well. And those heart twin tails, and then the heart string decorations all around her, of referencing not just, hearts and love and magic because magical girls, but referencing how her goggles display power. It's not stars or bars. It's hearts. And her design is so cool and neat and unique. It's still got that like frilly feel, but it's more sleek, and it kind of references that investigative-esque feeling, even though she's not part of the inspection team. Nanako-san herself is super relatable, wanting to keep what you have, but also hating what you have, She's doing her best to work up to her own goal. She's constantly doubting what her boss is saying to do and what decisions she should make. But she's also really capable because she doesn't fail Piffle in any way. She acts as she does, as Piffle instructs her, really accurately and on the spot and quickly. So she has experience, and she may be non-combatant, she may be a little shy and reserved and not used to the situation, but she holds her ground. And while I didn't get the whole splash with Mana, I did feel it more with Nanako-san, and a lot about Nanako-san appeals to me more, so she's gonna get an A. I should really, she might. You know what? We'll put her next to Shadow Gale because they're part of the Piffle squad, the surviving Piffle squad. I may actually like her more. No, a little less. Yeah, I think that works. Next is okay. This is this is gonna be a Tama situation, but possibly even worse. Okay, and just bear with me. But I promise there's merit into how I feel about this. Tepsekame is a tortoise or a turtle. She's in the science club room and she is an animal. Before she turned into a magical girl, her whole life was live in glass cage, eat food when I am fed, stare into the abyss of the wall next to me, right? Then Toko being Toko and not caring who she turns into a magical girl and trying to protect herself, transforms the whole science room, science prep room, club room, whatever, into magical girls, which is the five middle schoolers and then the Nozomi, the teacher, right? And the turtle, the pet turtle, into Tepsekame. The pet's name was May, so her magical girl name is just an extension of what her name was. And yet, she's, to me, by far the most interesting character in Limited. How did this happen? I don't know. I feel like I'm a sucker for characters who are learning how to express themselves, and May is doing just that. Her face doesn't show anything. I mean, she was a turtle. She didn't have a need to. She had no interaction with other beings besides giant hand giving her food, right? And she's now a magical girl, mostly human, with human thoughts and the capability for human emotion. And she's absent-minded, which suits her powers of becoming one with the wind. And I think she was an Egyptian turtle, actually, which is where that Arabian dancer motif kind of comes into her design. But basically, May is so fundamentally different in what she is that it makes her super interesting. Like, the first perspective we get of her, I was confused. I was confused, as all of the other girls would also be, right? You get this like perspective of her blank, absent-minded, somewhat philosophical and introspective nature of what she is, but there's not a full understanding of her situation because she never could achieve that before. So her interactions with the other girls are, is this how you smile? And she's baring her teeth like she's with fangs, growling. Or she's like, doesn't remember who's who, and she can't tell who is an enemy and who's not. And she's like the first to sense incoming opponents. And what she does throughout the course of the story is for her to keep her form, right? Because Toko says, protect me or you can't keep your magical girl forms. Of course, a lower being given such power is going to want to keep that power. And May does her earnest best to maintain this magical girl form. I bet you if she wasn't at threat, she would have maintained this Tepsekame form throughout the entire story. But of course, she has to detransform and blah blah blah. Her perspective is one of the most interesting I've read in the series. I like the way she talks. I like the way she thinks. She has a super cute design. It's different than the other magical girls with the whole genie in a lamp, Arabian dancer, all that. Her color scheme is really nice. The fact that she's a turtle does so much in ways you wouldn't expect. And this is the first time, right, that I've actually didn't expect a character to survive, and they survived. She survived. When she got hit by Sonia, I was like, that's a clue saying that she's not as powerful as we think she is, but she made it. And I just want to read I don't usually do this, but I just want to read the end of this volume 6. This is right after Pukin blows up, and this is a conversation between Nanako-san and Tepsekame. Okay, so just bear with me a moment. I'll try and read this as clearly as possible. Amid the rain of blood, Nanako-san thought, I have to thank her, at least. She's thinking about Mana here. She looked up at Tepsekame to see her crying. Her lips were in a tiny pout, and tears fell from her eyes that seemed to say she didn't enjoy crying. What about Rainpal? And then Mei answers, she's dead, and Wedding is dead too. Everyone's dead. Everyone was dead. Rainpal and Wedding and Kurukuru Hime and Funny Trick, Pukin's and Rainpal's deaths would have been communicated to her boss, who may have still been in that meeting. So now, there was no longer any reason for the Department of Diplomacy to bring out that weapon of mass destruction. Was this for the best? Was this really how things should end? And then Mei asked, is Mei smiling now? No, you're crying. Mei can cry without practicing. Why is that? And then Nanako-san answers, I wonder. I don't think any of the endings to any of the books hit me as hard as those last few passages. I don't know what it was. Right? You expect that emotionless character to show emotion, but the way it was written, either it's raining blood from Pukin's exploding death. You have 2 people left. And, Nanako-san is thinking, wow, did it really have to be this way? I wish things could have gone differently. Mei not really understanding the situation, but realizing that all of the people who could have been close to her are gone. She has emotion for the first time. And the whole book, dude, she's trying to understand how to smile and show her gratitude and laugh. And, it's a background thing, right? It's a little subplot that's not really at the forefront between all the backstories and drama and action and death and fights and whatever. But it struck a chord with me. And that ending was the perfect cherry on top to really just make me feel that emotional blast of this damn, like, wow, there was weight to all this. Mei is limited by what she is fundamentally as an organism, and she's limited by her lack of understanding. And I really, really hope that in future volumes, whether it's side stories or main volumes or what, that she comes back and she grows and learns to emote. Even if she keeps that blank face and curt nature, she's a turtle. Who knows how much she can change as a magical girl. But she really did hit me in the feels right at the end. And I already liked her a whole bunch. And just that somberness amidst the rain of blood and the dead bodies around them. Mei was the one who really hammered that in. So she may not have been at the forefront for most people, maybe. For the story, perhaps. But for me, she's S. She really is. And it's hard, right, to put her above everyone else. But she's like on the level as these 3 at least. To me. Truly. Man, I love Mei. Mei's great. Lastly for the new characters is Pythie, we don't really say her first name. Frederica is what the book refers to her. She was mentioned once in Volume 2, I believe, or Volume 3, one of the Restart books, that she trained Snow White after Cranberry's game. I thought it was a throwaway name. I could have not been more foolish, huh? So, she's the one that frees Pukin and Sonia Bean, and it's Tot Pop, where she Tot Pop that freed her. She was sealed because she committed grave crimes. When you think of like a big bad villain, or she's not the big bad of this book per se. She's just causing the big bads to do what they do. She seems to be an overarching villain, and I'll get to that. When you think of that, she's the more strategist, calm, deceiving type, and you learn a little more about her, and she has a fetish for hair, and that kind of threw me for a loop. And then I realized, oh, she needs hair to use her magic. She probably developed that whole thing because she needs to wrap hair around her fingers to access the crystal ball and all that. Or maybe it was reversed. She had that thing before she became a magical girl. Who knows? Frederica consistently not betrayed my expectations, but deceived me in the scope of what she was. Right? Obviously, Snow White and Ripple arrested her. She comes back. You think she's probably going to get killed by Pukin at some point? She doesn't. She's actually really smart about how she handles the two wild cards of Pukin and Sonya Bean. And she makes it out of this whole ordeal alive by playing dirty right at the end. She manipulates Wedden's promises in a way where she can break free of the loop and betray Wedden and her ability. She's kind of like a worm or a snake, and how slimy and squiggly she gets her way out of certain death a couple of times. And, and just, it's interesting how she doesn't die. To think, though, that, how do I say? To think that both her and Ripple would not be alive if it weren't for each other. And I told you I was going to get to Ripple, but Frederica gets what she wants at the end. She gets her freedom. She's away. She's escaped, and she's planning something. And her whole thing, right, is she was a trainer for magical girls, and her ideal magical girl has wonderful hair, of course, but there's a certain excitement that she derives from magical girls. It's hard to place what it is. For Pukin, it's that brutality. For some, it's the excitement. For some, it's their honest and, nature full of justice. She just loves magical girls. She is a magical girl to love magical girls, right? And, her whole fetish thing is weird, but for her role in the story, it's undeniable that she's very important, and she was fairly interesting to read. She's above Rainpow, right there, I would say. There's going to be a lot more of her because she survived, and you know what she did at the end of the book? Not only did she save Ripple's life after Ripple became a pincushion, but she took Pukin's sword at the end during Pukin's battle, which, others thought was, taking the sword so Pukin can't use it. She took the sword so Pukin couldn't use it and, helped the girls, but she took it for herself, pricked Ripple with it, and brainwashed Ripple to forget who she was. And now that Ripple is recovering due to some dubious medicine in some underground bunker somewhere or something, it's very clear that Ripple is going to become an enemy to possibly Snow White and Piffle. Or if Nautical-san goes back on the field, her too. And that's interesting. Brainwashing is a very delicate trope, I feel, right? Because, in short bursts, like how Pukin did it with Rainpow or with Wedden, it's more easily manageable and all that. Frederica seems to have Ripple under her wing to train her up to be a whole different person. Ripple doesn't even know she's a magical girl right now, right? Ripple's been through a whole bunch. Surviving Cranberry's game, barely surviving Toko's limited game and all that. Now she's brainwashed, forgot who she was. Toko was only in B City in the first place because she wanted to support her friend Snow White, who was higher up in rank. She's softened up so much and everything. I'm going to get to her in a sec. But point is, Frederica, for what she is interesting. I'll look forward to more of her. I think she could do a lot. Whether that improves or drops my opinion of her in the future, we'll have to see. But for what she did in Limited, and for bringing back someone who was... Oh, I'm sorry. I think I just destroyed my mic. For what she did in Limited, and for bringing back someone that was teased in Restart, neat. I like her. Ripple is maintaining her position. I do want to talk about her, though. She has definitely lost the lower part of her left arm, and she's lost her left eye. Throughout Limited, there's multiple mentions of how she's handicapped because of this, but how she's learned and grown to accept that handicap and fight quite well, even being only with one arm and one eye. And I think that's awesome. Ripple, you never let me down. You're awesome. I'm glad you're pushing through. When you became a pincushion because of Postery, I nearly flooded a river with my hypothetical tears. But you're alive. You're not kicking, but you're alive. You're there. You have a chance to come back in full. I'm hoping you do. I think she was really neat as a story element here. She's no longer clicking her tongue every 2 seconds. She's softened up, and it says that she's become a little bit more like Top Speed. And wow, isn't that wonderful? But there's not much else to say for Ripple. She was doing her best. She wasn't lethal. She was, just trying to make her way to Snow White. And I hope that does happen one day, or maybe Snow White comes to save her, or whatever. Oh man, how is Snow White? Snow White has one friend, then it's Ripple, and now that Ripple is presumed dead. Snow White, if you're in Joker's, which I believe is the next volume, I hope you're doing well mentally, girl, because you did not seem to be doing well mentally in Restart. I do not want this to shatter your psyche even more. But anyway, I will say, I forgot the limitations. Frederica is limited by her fetish and her desires, I guess, to see a true magical girl. Perhaps she's even limited by her own overconfidence a little bit. And Ripple, of course, is limited by the magical kingdom in trying to do what she needs to do for her friend, or wants to do for her friend. And she is limited, of course, by her handicap. But anyway, if I skipped over someone's limitation, I was trying to go with a theme there, but if it wasn't all there, it wasn't all there. I rambled, but I wanted to ramble. Limited was great. It's a shared second place with the first arc, I would say. Restart is still my favorite, but Limited was a fun read, especially in the second volume where it started to kick up. I appreciated seeing more of the Magical Kingdom's terrible politics. Ugh. And I have no idea what Joker's has in store, but surely there'll be someone with a card-based, magical ability, or perhaps a comedic ability. Maybe, I don't know. This series continues to have a vice grip on my whole consciousness, and dang, Magical Hero Racing Project. You're pretty great. I'm looking forward to what's next, and I'm hoping for Ripple, man. Please, Ripple, you didn't die twice. Let's keep up that trend, okay?